Welcome, everyone, and thanks for entering the Lobby of Hobbies. My name is Jazz, and I'm joined by my lovely wife, Delilah, who is my, I would say, board gaming nemesis, rival. What do you call the person who beats you at every game you teach them, even though they're the casual gamer? And it's not even by a little bit. It's always
Beginner's
by
luck? No.
no. It's definitely not beginner's luck. It's always by a lot. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm casual when it comes to winning. You are more the experience when it comes to winning. I would say that. So on this episode of Lobby Talks, we're going to be talking about what we believe are our top three reasons that women and people of color are underrepresented in the hobby. I think this is something that you and I have discussed before, haven't we?
Yeah,
And
several times.
yeah, several times, and it's something that we think I think I've told you all the time. I've seen it in the hobby, or people are talking about it on Facebook and things like that. But yeah, I think it's something that we need to discuss. You kind of share what we honestly think as people of color, as a woman, and what we feel. So without further ado, let's get into this. All right, babe. So now, being your first time here in the channel, I want you to go first with your number three. So let's hit it.
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. um, and just as a little disclaimer out there, this list is going to be based on my personal opinion, my experiences. So your opinions may differ. But, just to kind of kick it off, my number three would probably have to be lack thereof exposure to the board gaming hobby. So for me, growing up, my exposure to board games was pretty simple. We played the typical Monopolies, the Unos, the Trouble, and then your typical was it War card games, Go Fish. So really not a large variety of board games that you kind of see behind us. So I would say for me, and I don't know if it has to do with culture growing up, just even my parents and their exposure. To me, I think a lot of that has to do with like my culture and my background growing up, and then women. So for me, it's gonna have to kind of play hand in hand, women and culturally. Women weren't seen often playing games. One of our biggest games culturally is dominoes,
Yeah.
and that's probably the only game I really remember my mom being really, really into. She would definitely play the Unos and the Monopolies with us, and so would the rest of my relatives. But I think that was probably, to me, the biggest potential barrier for women and people of color getting to the game.
Gotcha. Now, for my number three, I would have to say it has got to be theme and art. I think when it comes now to theme and art, I think that plays a huge role because as a person of color, I just don't know how. I know how I feel, but I just don't know how everyone else feels when you have this, game that's just talking about colonization of like the, people of your native land. Like being Hispanic, the Caribbean islands. There's games, a bunch of games that are out there that talk about colonization of, Caribbean, countries and territories. And I think that one thing can be something that's a huge turnoff. I think it definitely plays a huge thing where it's like, why do I want to play this game? Like, I really don't care what the mechanics are. And you know me, like, I'm big on mechanics first. And sometimes I'll be honest, I can admit that I've kind of not thought of it because I didn't really open the rule book and read the rule book. I just, played games. But, I think of games like that we've played Five Tribes that has the Mancala mechanic, but there's a card in there that's a slave cards. And you're like, oh, I have to trade these slaves in or whatever. And it's a huge turnoff. I know for me. I know it was one that was for you.
Right. I think that was one of the first comments that I had made when we sat down to play that game. And
yeah.
I distinctly remember saying, why are these cards labeled this way?
Yeah. And I think, that's talking about just people of color. But when I think of women, I think of situations where, games are just the art is just super objectifying to women. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let's just see how scantily of clothing we can put on these women. And it's like and people continuously push the envelope. And I don't know those types of games, let alone I'm turned off by them in general. But when I see some of them, like, hey, I'm gonna bring this game and just sit down with you and play. It's like, that's a huge turnoff to a woman. So I think, yeah, seeing theme and art that does not appeal or is even done tastefully. I think that's important. I think publishers need to be very mindful of how they do these things, is being very considerate of how they present these themes, how they present the box art, and really who that game is going to cater to, because it's not going to cater to majority of people of color or majority of women when you do things like that. So yeah, that would be my number 3.
Yeah, it's interesting that you selected that as your number 3. That kind of is a good segue into my number 2. So, again, riding on that theme, interests. What is relevant? What are you able to relate with? For me, and I've told you, one of the things that attracts me to a game is the theme that I can understand, a theme that's relevant to me. Because if I sit down to play a game, I want to really understand the premise.
Yeah.
Why am I taking these tokens and doing this, and what is the purpose of my play actions? And I think that's just, that may be a thing in general, but I think, if I look at your board game collection, if I look at board games that are out there, it's very few themes that really pique my interest to say, hey, I want to play that one. Can we play that one?
Gotcha.
And, I think that could be a potential barrier for, women, people of color. What can I really relate with? And I think, at times,
Yeah.
even when we receive those summer readings and we get certain books, I know that's been a huge topic of potential controversy is, are these books relatable to people of color? Are these books relatable to women? And I think you find that almost that same issue with board games.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never even thought of it that way. Like, when you come to like, yeah, well, I thought of it obviously because the theme, but when it comes to like, taking into that realm, when you're thinking about, even growing up as a kid, like, what things that you were learning, what did they pertain to you? How did they pertain to you? How did they portray women? How did they portray people of color? I think that's crucial. So it's on to my number 2. So your number 2, my 3 were a crossover. So my number 2 has got to be what I would deem the internal struggle. Now, for me, that's like the idea that the specific person, me being the person of color, you being a woman, you feel already like you don't fit in. Like there's already a predisposed notion that you have in the back of your mind, like, oh, this is not for me. Like I just don't. This is not what I am supposed to be doing or be a part of. Like, or that's not a hobby for me because it's not made for me. Like you said, maybe it's the theme or whatever the case may be, but you already have a predisposed notion, and that I think you create that potential barrier already there. I know I've seen it. We've worked with children at our church. Youth groups. I've dealt with not only youth but high school kids specifically, and I had a group of high school boys that I mentored, and one of these things, they're like, oh, like, Jazz, like, what are you doing? Like, that's not that, I've never heard of this game. And like they were already had this disinterest in the game, not only just because they weren't exposed to it, but because, like, if it wasn't, like you said, Uno or Monopoly or those things that they were already known, like, they didn't even want nothing a part of it, because to them that was something that, that's something that those suburban white kids play. Like, that's not us. Honestly, it's sad to say that, but it's crazy that people have that same predisposed notion. And I kind of relate it to sports. If you look at sports from inner cities, I think you see a lot of sports that are specifically geared towards in those inner cities that are football, baseball, basketball. Those are the sports that you're going to have in the school, and very seldom are you seeing some of these schools have golf programs, tennis programs, things like that. They're going to cater to broadening your horizon of what else is out there. And I think that also plays into the fact with women. Women are have this predisposed notion, oh, that's not for me, that's for guys, that's what guys do. It comes kind of along the lines of video games. Like when if you're a woman growing up, I didn't grow up with a house of sisters, you grew up with brothers, where it's like, oh, my the boys play the video games and the girls are supposed to do this, and
play with Barbies.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the thing. It's just this predisposed notion of what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. So yeah, that would be my number 2.
Yeah, definitely very interesting.
So, on to your number 1.
We're
at the top of the list.
So, my number 1 would most likely have to do with time, lack of time. And I think, this is not only big for women, but it's also big for just people of color. Many times women and people of color, we take on that working class. So, we work for a living. After work, we come home to, quickly kind of whip something up for dinner, tend to homework, tend to children, laundry. So a lot of times your schedule, density can really play a part into why we're not able to really get down to sit down at a table and learn a new game. So, not only are we limiting ourselves on learning new games because of our schedule, but also finding the mental energy to sit down and learn a board game. I think, many times I've come to you and I've said, I know you've been wanting to play a game, but if I can make a request, can we play a game that I'm familiar with? And that's most of the time just mental fatigue and just really finding, where I'm going to draw, what energy am I going to find to sit down and learn a new game. And sometimes it could even be priorities. So, if I have the option of, I have an hour to myself, do I play a board game or do I relax and take a nice bubble bath and really soak and decompress from a hard day's work?
Yeah, I think I feel you. I think, even in our household, everything's, we're 50-50, but I can definitely see how some households are not that. You have where there's one person's doing the cooking, cleaning, everything else. But like you said, even with the idea of the working class, yes, a majority of people of color are part of that working class. We honestly, we weren't born into money. We weren't one of those things. That definitely we weren't, right? Our parents worked hard to be where they're at. But and even women are part of that working class as well. Women are paving the way for a lot of things, and they're doing so many great things. So you see that a lot of women, a lot of people of color that are working hard, managing multiple roles within the house. Single parent mothers, things like that. So yeah, there would definitely be a lack of that time to be able to do those things. So I can definitely see that. It's a good one. I never thought of that. You always come up with things that I don't ever think of. Well, I do know that time is definitely the reason why, I can't learn I don't know how many, 30-something, 40-something games unplayed on my shelf. Yeah. So I try and play them solo though. But, so the pandemic hasn't helped either.
No. I've tried here and there to, learn new games, but. So
my number one thing that I think is really a hindrance has to be intimidation. It can kind of go with the internal struggle and kind of might build on the internal struggle that someone might have, but specifically in intimidation, it could be an experience that someone had. For example, like I'll give you my experience. I think I went to my very first convention, and I was walking around, and the first thing I noticed was, like, I'm one of the very few people of color here. I didn't notice many women, but honestly, not being a female myself, that wasn't my first thing in mind. It was like, wow, there's not many minorities here. But being able to walk around the convention hall, see things. I'll be honest, sometimes I felt as though when I wanted to maybe demo a game, I kind of just sat in the background waiting to be asked. And maybe I honestly maybe might have felt intimidated that like, oh, no one really kind of asked me a question, or do I want to try this game out? And sometimes it could sheer be that the fact that the person was so busy at the booth, that they were just catering to what they had, or catering to people who really stepped up. But I think sometimes you just feel intimidated because you do not look like everyone else. But I think it also comes from the fact that there are people and who are just vocal. We don't want you at the table, And I've heard stories of, husbands and wives, and a wife was at the table, and you have a guy that was kind of like, overbearing on the female, like, and how she did, like, what every move that she made, all those things, and it's a huge turnoff. So those things. And I think even when it comes down to just people of color, I know I wanted to go play a game at that same convention, and I was just walking around the free play area, and people have these signs that say, looking to play, looking for players. And I saw a group of people looking for players. They had the sign right next to them, and I saw the game. It was a game that I wanted to play. I don't even remember the game off the top of my head, but I actually got the courage to walk over there. It was probably day 2 of the convention, and I asked. I said, are you guys looking for another player? I see the sign. They said, oh, we have someone that we're waiting for. So. Honestly, and it was like almost like a cold shoulder-ish kind of response, as opposed to, oh, maybe next time if you want to come back around this time we can try it again. So it could have honestly been they were waiting for their friend, and it was just they were so busy. It was a huge convention, and I honestly will say it could be that case. But you feel that intimidation. You already feel, like you say, you see the underrepresentation of people that look like you. So therefore, I think that plays into a part of the intimidating factor of what it is, jumping into something that you are the minority in. And then that builds upon those things internally. And that, I think, what kind of led into my number 2, which was that internal struggle. You build upon that. It's predisposed as well. So, yeah, I think that's one thing. You have to be able to feel like you are included, and having people feel like you're included.
Yeah, I would definitely have to say, I've even myself asked you. I remember you going to a convention and me kind of questioning, are there really women that attend these conventions? Because prior to that, I had attended a Dice Masters tournament with you, and the room was full of predominantly males. I think I maybe saw 1 or 2 females there,
Yeah.
and a few younger kids there. But for the most part, it was a Caucasian male based room.
Heavily dominated, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that was, when you had invited me to that convention, that was my kind of preconceived notion that I'm going to go to a room full of males, and, am I really going to have the chance to try out some of these games? So, I declined the offer and, said have fun, and just kind of spent my day doing probably some other things.
So she left me to myself, people. You heard it here. She left me to myself. I had to feel uncomfortable now. Honestly, no, it was good. So it's good. I think we did good with this list. So we'll see. We'll see what you people think. So why don't you go ahead, if you have anything on your specific list that you think is a barrier that prevents women or people of color from getting into the hobby, or for knowing about the hobby, drop a comment down below. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to chat with you. And if you like the content you're seeing, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so that you can be notified anytime we drop a new video. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. But yeah, I think this is one of those things that you see it on social media. I think I've told you before that, we're seeing, I think even as recently as this week, you're seeing men who are, at the forefront of this industry, who are making comments about, women that are kind of degrading or derogatory, just comments that shouldn't be things that you be said to women, and vice versa. You're hearing people who are at the forefront of this industry, whether it be people, I'm talking about like people, designers, people like big name people who have made comments about people of color, and it's not, sometimes it's not directly explicit. This one unfortunately kind of was explicit, But we see that, and it's something that we definitely need to do better of. And I think it's something that we need to find ways to be inclusive of more people. And that's the reason we started this channel. That was my focus. My focus was, how do we get more people to the hobby? It doesn't matter if if you're a person of color or not, but how do you get more people who don't know about this hobby to the hobby? But also, how do you get more people that look like you, because you're very well underrepresented? And that was one of our goals here. And we see there's many other awesome content creators, board game designers, publishers out there who are very at the forefront, want to help push this along. And I think that it's with their help, I think their encouragement, you'd be able to start this channel. Honestly, had some great encouragement from some people, and some awesome content creators. And if you're listening, I'm going to drop a lot of some names down there of content creators, like YouTube channels, people on social media to follow on Twitter and Instagram, to follow their stuff, because there are people of color, there are women out there that are putting some great designs, some great content, everything. So there are people out there that look like you, that look like me, that are trying to advance this hobby, just advance things in general for people. And I think it's awesome. So again, we want to just give you a thanks. But before we go, I'd like to give a big shout out and thank you to Ricardo from all the way in Portugal. We're here in the U.S., who did the logo for our channel. And I want to give a big thanks to him, because I definitely wasn't the most tech savvy person when it comes to trying to sit hours on a computer trying to design something. But he opened his, just was open and welcome to giving us a good design. So I want to give a big shout out to Ricardo. And I'll drop his website as well down in the comments below, actually in the description below. So again, thank you for joining us. And again, this is here from Lobby of Hobbies, and I hope that you discovered something as well today. So we'll see you later.